So there could be some kind of observation data. It could be looking at student work. But somehow you have to have a picture of where you are. And what we found, whether we're talking about coaching or teaching or any kind of professional practice, is often people don't have a particularly good picture of understanding of what it is when they do what they do. I certainly was that way. When I watched video of myself communicating in a meeting, I couldn't believe what I saw. So somehow you have to get a clear picture of reality. We use video more often than not. And then you set a goal, and then you have a teaching strategy to help you hit the goal. Now, sometimes in North American schools, they talk about SMART goals, but we found the model of a SMART goal not to be particularly effective. And so we shifted to what we call a peers goal. And so a peers goal involves certain things. The first thing the peers goal involves is that it's a powerful goal. So that is to say, this goal is going to make a socially significant impact on students' lives. It's going to make a real meaningful change. So decreasing transition time from 10 minutes to 2 minutes and adding 8 minutes a day spread over 160 days is going to be a powerful goal. Helping kids see connections between their personal lives and the work they're doing so that they're motivated and excited about being in school is a powerful goal. Having kids who read for pleasure, that would be a powerful goal. And then the second thing is that it's an easy goal. And I'm not saying we're watering down the rigor of the goal. I'm just saying we have a goal that we've taken. The best kind of goal is one that makes a really big difference, and it's really easy to do. It's quick and it's powerful. And then thirdly, we have an emotionally compelling goal, which is to say it's a goal that matters a lot to the teacher. It's the thing the teacher thinks about when they drive home. Fourthly, we have a goal that's reachable, which is to say we have a finish line. We can measure it some way. It doesn't have to be quantitative, but we know what it looks like when the goal has been met. And some strategy is going to help us hit the goal. A goal that's not reachable will be one like, I want more higher order thinking in my classroom. Well, that's a great idea, but exactly what would be different would be the important part of the measurable part. What do we mean by higher order thinking? And then what's a strategy we can use on teaching practice to help us reach that goal? And the last thing is a student-focused goal. It's a goal that matters to kids. It's going to make a difference in kids' lives. And the reason you need a student-focused goal is that a teacher-focused goal, you could hit a teacher-focused goal and not have it make any impact on kids' lives. And so a student-focused goal is a way in which we can sort of guarantee that what we're doing has an unmistakable positive impact on kids. The rest of the process is pretty straightforward. Once we've identified the goal, then we help the person learn the teaching strategy to help them hit the goal. So let's say they wanted to shift from closed questions to open questions, or they wanted to use more cooperative learning, or they wanted to use learning maps to help kids sort of see how the content works. We would probably describe those things really precisely, maybe with a checklist, and then we give the teacher a chance to see it. They might see it on a video. They might see it going to watch another teacher. We might come in the classroom and take a few minutes of the class just to model the thing itself. We could model it in the classroom without kids there. There are lots of different ways, but somehow the person hears about it and they see it, and then they're ready to go try it out, and that's the improvement part. They implement the practice to see if it hits a goal. More often than not, the first time through, you're not going to hit the goal. And so what you do is you make adjustments. Maybe you picked the wrong strategy. Maybe what you did is you've got the right strategy, but it's going to take a little bit of time. Or maybe we just need to tweak the way we're teaching the strategy, but we keep messing around with stuff, making adjustments until we hit the goal. And then we have to decide, do we want to hit another goal? Remember, a powerful goal, a goal that's going to make a real difference in kids' lives. So a coach and a teacher working together might identify, for example, that they want, say, a second grade teacher, they want kids to be able to write a well-organized paragraph. And they establish a checklist of what a good paragraph would involve. And then they might use a variety of teaching strategies, possibly I do it, we do it, you do it, the gradual release model, or learning maps to help kids understand the content, or have the kids do peer-to-peer use of a checklist to double check on how they've written the paragraphs, or any number of different adjustments, and they'd keep going until they hit the goal. When they hit the goal, it's a pretty powerful thing to go from kids who can't write to kids who can really write in a clear and palpable way. Second part, second success factor is that we want kids to be in a coaching process where the teacher is respected, where we understand adults. I don't think we'll have that positive impact on children if we don't position teachers as professionals. If the teachers aren't positioned as professionals, I'm not sure that coaching will succeed. I'm also not sure that we'll have a really good culture for student growth if we don't have that going on. So in this book, Unmistakable Impact, I talk about what I mean by partnership principles, and I talk about the complexity of helping. And some of the things I talk about in that book, you can download from this link, and you'll get the slides after this presentation, so you're more than welcome to go there and poke around and see what you can find. But the essence of the matter is that part of understanding adults is to understand the complexity of helping another person. Now, we could spend a lot of time on this, but I just want to touch on these things briefly. The first thing is that, and what we found is borne out by the research on change, which is that most people don't have a very clear idea of what it looks like when they do what they do. Prochaska, whose book Changing for Good is a classic work in the field of change and counseling, he says the first stage of change is pre-contemplation. When I'm starting out to make a change, if I'm pre-contemplative, I don't even realize that I need to make the change. That's why video is so powerful, because it pulls people out of pre-contemplation and puts them into contemplating change. The second thing is that people take it personally when you talk about what they do. In fact, I think talking about teaching with a person is almost as emotionally complex as talking to a parent about how they parent. You can criticize how I parent, you criticize who I am as a person, and it's the same thing with teachers. You criticize their practice, and they're going to take it personally because they're invested in it. It's not just a job. It's something that matters deeply to most teachers. So what often happens with respect to change and helping and identity is that we don't actually have a conversation about what's going on. We avoid the truth because if we go for it and we say something that's too direct, the person might resent it because they'll take it personally. Or alternatively, we say the truth in a way that offends the person and they resent it. And then the next time we talk to the person, there's a coldness to our relationship that wasn't there before. What I say is it doesn't do you any good to speak the hard truth unless it's actually heard and acted upon. What you have to do is you have to figure out how to speak the truth so it can be heard. And the coaching cycle and the use of video are some of the ways in which we try to do that. The third thing is that most adults have a job, if they're in education, that we would call knowledge work. That is, they think for a living. And there's an author, Thomas Davenport, who studied knowledge workers. And what he found is that the defining characteristic of a knowledge worker, after he did surveys and interviews of many, many different knowledge workers, people who think for, like a teacher. Teachers, in my mind, are the quintessential example of a knowledge worker. One book says that teachers make between 800 and 1,500 decisions a day. I don't know if it's that much, but teachers are thinking a lot. They're tired at the end of the day because so much thinking. Anyway, what Davenport found is that people who are knowledge workers want to do the thinking. And when you do the thinking for someone else, they're going to resist. So the model that some smart people downtown will make a plan and everybody will do the plan exactly as they've been told doesn't fit with professional knowledge workers because they resist. They want to be a part of the thinking. The fourth thing is that most people want to get the status they think they deserve. And in a helping relationship, if I feel I'm not getting the status I deserve, I check out. That's why we agree with Daniel Pink that when we're change leaders, what we should do is put the other person in the big chair and we sit in the little chair. That is, we see ourselves as benevolent towards the people we're working with, that we want them to succeed. It's almost an act of service to be a coach. And the last issue is that people aren't that motivated by change unless they can see its personal relevance to them. If we give somebody a goal, there's a good chance that they might, at best, comply. They might even resist in kind of open ways. But if we involve people in the development of a goal that matters to them, then we'll blow you away with what they do. It's naive to think we could just come up with goals and force them on people and expect them to embrace them, especially since we're talking about people with university degrees and years of experience, professionals, you know. And so professionals want to get the status they deserve, and they're not going to be motivated in most cases unless they have at least a voice in the materials whatever the goal is they're doing. Now, in order to address the helping, we came up with a list of 7 principles. I call them the partnership principles. And I won't go into all the details here. But the core idea here is that we position the other person as counting the same as us. We see them as equally valuable. and we give them a lot of autonomy in what they do. Now, whenever I talk about autonomy, often people will say, well, what about accountability? And I think sometimes what we do is we misunderstand the concept of accountability. Usually when people say we need to hold people accountable, they're saying we need to make sure people do what we tell them to do. And the trouble with that kind of accountability, and what I call, is irresponsible accountability. It's irresponsible because the person who's being held accountable isn't the one who has any ownership of whatever is being asked. If I tell the other person what to do and I see my job as rewarding them and punishing them to make them do what I think they need to do, I shouldn't be surprised when things don't work out and they blame it on me. I'll give you an example. At our workshop here in Kansas a while back, there was a instructional coach here, and she said, you know, we had this teacher, and the principal went to meet with her, and he said to her, you know, your scores are not going very well. Your kids are not really showing any kind of evidence of being successful in the classroom. And the teacher, he said, so what are you going to do to try to improve things? And the teacher looked at the principal and said, I've done everything you told me to do, and I've done it with fidelity. I've done it the way I was supposed to do it. So if it's not working, it's not me. It's your program. That's what the issue is. And that's irresponsibility because she doesn't have a choice, because she doesn't have a voice in what she does. She doesn't feel any responsibility. I'm just doing what I'm told, and it didn't work. So responsible accountability is where people are working hard on a process that's going to have an unmistakable positive impact on kids. And the kind of conversations we have to do that are partnership conversations. They're ones where the other person's voice matters, where they have a choice, where we engage in back and forth reflective conversations that are focused on real life learning. And not surprisingly, we go into the conversation expecting to learn and benefiting from learn. The old saying about reciprocity is, when one teaches, two learn. So when it comes to adults, the heart of the matter, I think, is that, of course, we have to have change that makes a big difference on kids. But to have that kind of change, accountable change, people have to have some autonomy. They have to feel their status has been acknowledged. And their brains have to be engaged in the process through a reflective dialogue. Without a partnership conversation, I'm not sure we get anything more than irresponsible accountability. The third thing is an instructional playbook, and it's a simple concept, but the idea of the instructional playbook is that an instructional coach, their job essentially is to help teachers improve by sharing with them proven teaching practices. Now, the teacher sets the goal based on their own assessment of their reality, but then once we know we have a goal, let's say we wanted to increase authentic engagement, we need a set of proven practices to help us hit that goal. That's what I mean by an instructional playbook. Instructional playbook is a small number of practices, maybe 15 core practices that we feel in our heart of hearts and know these things will make a big difference. So, for example, you're going to have a one-page document at the start of your playbook that says, this is what our go-to practices are. And then you're going to want to make sure those practices have a real impact on kids' lives. Increasing the amount of conversation between students when it's productive conversation might be a high-impact strategy. Learning maps might be a high-impact strategy. Then your playbook should be comprehensive, which is to say it addresses more than just one area. It's not just about formative assessment or just about differentiation. It's about planning and assessment and engaging and increasing mastery of learning, and then community building, creating a positive learning community. And that playbook should involve checklists, that is, precise explanations of practices so people know what it looks like. Basically, if you're an instructional coach and you're going to help people learn something, much like an athletic coach, you're going to want to give people precise explanations of what it looks like. Although, when you share those precise explanations, I think you need to recognize that it's going to look different in every classroom. And you leave teachers lots of room to modify things to meet the unique needs of their kids and to build on their strengths as teachers. I've got a book called High Impact Instruction, which is my attempt at putting together an instructional playbook. And in the book, I talk about these practices: planning, formative assessment, instruction, community building. There's a different chapter for each practice. And then for each of the practices, you'll see a number of checklists like this to describe it. So if you want to, you can just go to core1.com, High Impact Instruction, and you can download dozens of checklists as models. You don't have to buy the book. And there are many videos of teachers talking about how they use the practices and examples of them using the practices. Not that you would use this if you were using, for example, Marzano's work. I just think you have to go through Marzano and say, how do we break this down into a playbook instead of it being a whole bunch of practices put together. How we pull it out, we emphasize the most important ones and turn them into precise explanations. Take, for example, in the Art and Science of Teaching by Marzano, Chapter 5, if I've got it right, is all about engagement, and he has many different engagement strategies. Well, if you wanted to use those engagement strategies in a playbook, what you would do is you'd go through and pick out a few of them that you think are most important. That kids have a voice in their learning might be one, for example. And then you take that and you make it precise by pinning down exactly what it looks like. Now, when you sit down with a teacher, it's adaptive. You say, here's a checklist. This is a starting point. You might do it differently, but let's talk it through and let's make sure we know what it looks like. So these things so far, the coaching cycle, understanding adults, and instructional playbook get us going. But the other thing is we need to know what our goal is, and we need to measure progress towards the goal. And that means we need to gather data. And our go-to way, our main way of gathering data is, and the easiest way is through video. Now, I don't think anybody should be forced to watch video. I think if people don't want to do it, it's okay. Actually, it's more than okay in my mind. It's the way it should be. And I also think how the video is used is up to the teacher, and I think the teacher owns the video. Nobody else should see it unless the teacher wants to share it. It's private, it's theirs. In fact, when I talk to a teacher and we talk about using video, I say, if you want, I can record it on your device. I don't have to even have it. We can just put it on your device. What we found is that the teachers trust the coach, and in most cases, they can see the power of video. And I asked the teacher, do you want me to record you or do you want me to record the students? And I let them decide how long the video should be and what they want to see and when they want me to come. But video is really powerful. In most athletics, you wouldn't have high school students or possibly any students who are playing sports not watch themselves on video. If they're playing tennis, we're going to have them watch themselves and talk about their practice. We all know about the power of video in other fields. And now in education, it's growing at a rapid rate. The reason why it's kind of exploding right now is because of the smartphone. We've known about the power of video for decades. But now that you have a smartphone, you can stick your phone or your iPad or whatever you've got up on the wall. You can push the red button, record the class, and go back and look at it later on. What I say as a coach when I'm working with a teacher is I don't want to waste your time. I don't want to work on things that are really important. I want to do what matters the most to you. And maybe the easiest way to do that is I record your class, you look at it, we get together and we talk about what you want to work on. If you'd rather we don't do that, we can do it another way. But somehow we need to get a clear picture of where we are. Now this book, Focus on Teaching, lays out information about how to set up a psychologically safe environment and how coaches can use video, how teachers can use video to coach themselves, how teams can use video if they're volunteer teams to come together, how principals can use video with teachers who are interested in using it. So there's lots of ideas in there. And in that book, there are a lot of forms you can download about how to use video. And all those forms are on this website, corwin.com/focusonteaching. You can download them, you can use them, and you don't have to sign in or anything. Just go there and get them. Anything you can download, as far as I'm concerned, you can use it however you want to use it so long as you don't sell it. If you want to get it in people's hands and if it's online, you can get it. And just a quick thing, some things we might look at with data would be different ways of measuring engagement. About half the time when a teacher watches a video of their lesson, the first thing they want to focus on engagement. They said, I watched that, I can't believe the lack of engagement. We might want to look at instructional time. How much time is dedicated to hanging up your backpack, putting your books away, getting things, shifting from one activity to the next. It's not uncommon to see it be around 20%. 1 out of every 5 minutes essentially is wasted. And when you watch the video, you realize, man, I could get 15% more instructional time. I could add a month of instructional time just by working on that. Another thing we look at is the ratio of interaction, how well teachers reinforce teacher behavior or student behavior by letting kids know, I see you when you're doing that. Then there's how much time the teacher talks versus how much time the student talks. I'd say about 25% of the time, that's what comes up as a big thing. There are many other types of forms you can download that look at a lot of different things, but these are some of the sort of biggies. And then you don't have to use video to use data. You could look at other things. You could look at quizzes of student achievement. You could use rubrics or checklists. You could do student responses to checks for understanding, any kind of other achievement data. The only thing I'd say is whatever your evaluation form or whatever your data is, you want to make sure that you can do it frequently, that you can gather something all the time. So to say my goal is that I want by the end of the year some big thing and we're only going to measure it once doesn't make that much sense. You might also use, if you're using this kind of stuff, teacher evaluation data. But the trouble with something that's not video, like teacher evaluation data, is if I don't have a clear picture of current reality, I might not see the relevance of that data. It's not until I see the video that I go, oh, now I see what they're talking about. What data does is it gives you a finish line, and it gives you a way of measuring progress towards the goal. And without data, I think it's very hard for an instructional coach to be efficient and to have a big impact. Next thing is communication, and then there's leadership and system support. And as you can see, I kind of tried to put together different tools for addressing all these things. And over time, as they've come up, we've tried to come up with something for it. So for communication, I've got a book called Better Conversations. And when I come to Australia this year, I'll be talking about this book, and I'll be talking about the coaching cycle. Again, there's a ton of resources online. You can download them and use them. And our idea is that if you wanted to get good at any sport, you wanted to get good at tennis, let's say, you would probably practice a lot, and you would get feedback. And it would be helpful to have a coach, and the coach might even video record you and give you feedback. But you wouldn't just read a book about tennis and expect to be good. You'd have to go out, you'd have to practice, you'd have to work hard at it. You'd have to be dedicated to it and put hours and hours of time in. And when it comes to communication, I think the exact same thing is true. There's no book that's going to transform your communication. It's practice, it's feedback, it's looking at what you do. So what's on this website, and it's in these books, is there are a set of forms you can use to give yourself feedback on your communication. You can look at how you demonstrate empathy, how you find common ground with people, how you listen to other people, how you build trust, and a number of other practices. And you record yourself in conversations. They don't even have to be professional conversations. They could be conversations in your home or in the community. And you keep practicing on one habit until you get really good at it. Now, in the book, I talk about two different things. I talk about beliefs and habits. And I think understanding your beliefs is really important, because if you want to be an authentic person, you have to know who you are, and then you have to make sure your habits reflect who you are. Maybe you know somebody who thinks they're a really good listener and is really a terrible listener. That person is not authentic. That's not an authentic person. In fact, often we kind of dismiss a person whose actions don't reflect what they say their beliefs are. To be honest, I've been one of those people. I'm not that great at a number of different things. And so through the use of video and video recording my own conversations, I've started to get better. And kind of my dream would be that whole schools, they don't have to buy the book, they can just download the forms, but whole schools would start to look at how we communicate, because our schools are only as good as the conversations in the schools. And coaching won't work very well in an environment where there isn't a lot of mutual respect and sharing and learning, and where we don't see the good in other people. And we have to have schools where conversations are respectful and they become learning conversations, conversations grounded in trust instead of suspicion. So these are beliefs that hide, undergird the whole process, that I see others as equals. I want to hear what they have to say. I believe they should have a lot of autonomy. I don't judge people. The conversation is back and forth. And conversation should be life-giving. That is, I should feel engaged, and I should feel my well-being has been nourished by the conversation. And then the habits that we build in to the process are demonstrating empathy, listening to other people, engaging in back-and-forth conversations that are thinking conversations together, where it's a meeting of the minds. It's a thinking partnership. And we ask questions to make that kind of conversation take place, and we're aware of how to build emotional connections. We share positive information productively, we find common ground, and then part of having better conversations is to recognize in ourselves things we can do that can be destructive, our own toxic conversations, and in others, things that people can say that need to be redirected. Part of having good conversations is to have non-negotiables about things you won't accept, like racism. You hear a racist comment, you have to have a way to redirect it. A little while back, I had all the consultants here. Helen from Australia was here just about a week ago, and I said, let's go through all these habits and talk about which one's the most important one. And everybody sort of shuffled around cards and stacked them up, and the one that came out as being most important was trust. And trust, in many ways, is a part of all these other ones, but building trust is a really key communication habit too. So when you look at these habits and beliefs, I think for a coach to succeed, the coach needs to be moving towards getting these. No one's perfect. We're all going to make we're all going to have our struggles, but a coach is trying to be a good listener and maybe watching herself or himself on video to see how they communicate, and needs to be able to find common ground and build trust. And the book provides a way to do that. The other part about the communication is that I think it's easier for a coach to be successful when there's productive and constructive and supportive and encouraging and trusting conversation taking place in the school. If there's an absence of trust in a school, it's more difficult for the coach to succeed. The next habit here, or the next secret of successful programs would be leadership. And in this case, I write about this in the book Instructional Coaching. It's chapter 9. I think if you poke around online, you might be able to find the chapter that has the leadership ideas on it. And I came up with a number of leadership factors. Michael Fullen reproduced this article too in a book he published on change. So maybe you could find it there. We'll just touch on these briefly, but first off, to be a change leader obviously involves leadership. And a coach can't ignore the fact that they are leaders. I think we get a notion of a leader as somebody who goes into battle and takes on all kinds of odds and who's kind of top-down in their approach. And that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is a partnership leader. Primarily, at the heart of the partnership leader is that I have other people's best interests at heart. People can tell I want them to succeed, and I'm there for them in really authentic ways, not just lip service, but really helping them do it. And that involves a number of different things. One of them is I need to know kind of who I am, what my beliefs are, and what my boundaries are, what kind of conversations I will and won't participate in, and what my purpose is. And so part of being a leader is to think through what are my principles, what are my beliefs, what are my habits, and what's my goal, and so forth. It is hard to feel open to a leader who's very wishy-washy about what they believe. Now, you should be flexible. I also think it's hard to listen to somebody who's always sure they're right and not willing to hear that they're wrong. But it's a combination of solid ground and flexibility. The second thing is they have to understand how change works. Part of that is recognizing that people are usually pre-contemplative about change at the start. Another part is recognizing that change is not linear. We move forward, we fall back, we move forward, we fall back. One writer says we fall into the valley of despair. He says we start out with an uninformed optimism and we quickly shift into informed pessimism. And when I'm a coach, I have to recognize that there are going to be roadblocks and people are going to sort of despair, and I have to be there for them. I have to be emotionally intelligent, which I think in many ways is doing the better conversation stuff. I have to recognize how culture can interfere or support learning. If your school has a culture that it's up to the kids to learn, and it's really not my fault if they choose not to learn, then it's going to be harder to succeed as a coach, as opposed to a school where the culture is we're all committed to getting better, to doing the best we can do. And then I have this untechnical term, they have it together. The best coaches are reliable. They do what they said they're going to do. They show up when they said they're going to do. They're ambitious, which is to say they never let it rest. They're constantly hunting out better ways to improve the quality of kids' lives. But they're also stewards. They're benevolent towards the folks they work with. Their folks' first concern is what's best for the other person. So they're great listeners. They're respectful. And ambition without benevolence, I don't think works. I think it leads to resentment. If we have somebody who's all about themselves and pushing themselves forward and highly ambitious, we tend to resent that. And the flip side is also true, though. If you have someone who's a steward but doesn't get the job done, is unreliable and doesn't show up and sort of let things go, not enough change will happen. We need those kind of things, and I call that they have it together. And then to be a leader, you also have to take care of yourself. And in part, that's recognizing that when things don't go your way, or when there's a resentment you're encountering, or whatever it might be, probably people aren't upset with you, or upset with the position you represent. And so part of leadership, as Ron Hype has said, you have to separate yourself from the role you play to move forward. Last part is that it's going to be easier for the coach to succeed when they're in a system that supports them. In fact, when we sat down to talk about this and we talked about different organizations we've worked with, when there's system support, it's much, much more likely the coach will have a dramatic impact. And when there isn't system support, it's going to be tougher. So here are just a few things with respect to system support. One idea is that the principal guides focus in the school. Part of it is, I think, moving away from a culture of talk to a culture of action. A culture of talk is we're always talking about things, but not much happens. And so what happens is we have meetings all the time, and we talk about things in a general way, but when it really gets down to it, not much happens. But when the principal is guiding the school, you focus in on a small number of goals, maybe even just one goal, and this is a process I talk about on unmistakable impact. Teachers are actively involved in setting the goal, but then everybody sort of comes together and goes after this, what I call a learning target. One school I work with in Lincoln, Nebraska, when we observed the schools, the classrooms, we found that transition time, non-instructional time, was 22%. The whole school was interviewed, they all voted on it, and they said, we want to change transition time. We want it to be 5%. They shrunk it down to 4% over 18 months. And not surprisingly, scores went up by about 20% on the assessments. But had we showed up and said, you have to work on that, and we had tried to do about a bunch of other things all at the same time, kind of innovation overload, nothing would have happened. The reason it happened is the principal led the teachers in a process where they had a voice, and they had a choice, and they picked one area to focus on, and they came together and focused on it, made a big difference. A coach is going to be more successful when there's principal-guided focus in the system. The second thing is that there are better conversations, that you're in a system where people communicate in respectful ways. Third thing is their theoretical consistency, which is to say, if the coaches are taking a partnership approach and giving teachers a lot of autonomy, you would want the principal to see things the same way. If the principal is really top-down and the coach is really partnership, it's going to be really tough for the coach to succeed. And so to think deeply about what our beliefs are and what we do, I think, is a really key thing. Then I just got back survey results from close to 200 coaches from around the United States and Canada. I asked them, what are the roadblocks that stand in the way of you being successful? And the number one thing that came up was time. If I don't have enough time, I can't do the work. I mean, it came up on every survey. I'm constantly being asked to do too many things, and I can't get it all together. And without time to do coaching and without time for teachers to do coaching, it's not going to happen. Everybody wants a quick solution, but the trouble with quick fixes is they don't solve the problem, and the next time you try to bring about change, people are a little less likely to do it because they've already tried something that didn't work. Pretty quickly, teachers shift to saying, this too shall pass. And so to go deep and do it right, and take the time to do it right, is a critical part of system support. And then I think a district's going to want to have a instructional playbook, a small number of practices that the coach and principal know pretty deeply. If you don't know what your practices are, I don't know how you could be an instructional coach. You could be a different kind of coach. But since we have billions of dollars that's been spent on research on instructional practices, and we know some things make a difference, it seems to me it makes sense for an instructional coach to know those practices and share them in a way that genuinely respects the professionalism of teachers. That is, we don't show up and say, you need to do learning maps. We ask the teacher to get a clear picture of current reality. We help the teacher set a goal that matters deeply to the teacher. And then once we've got that goal, we say, well, here are a number of things research says could help you hit your goal. And then we adjust along the way if those practices don't exactly fit those students and that teacher. And then we need to know who is responsible for what and what the priorities are. when we did a big study here in North America where we interviewed coaches and we went in, what came up again and again and again is the coaches didn't really know what their job was. They had what we termed role ambiguity. And so the coach needs to know what their priorities are, what their role is, what gets shared, what doesn't get shared, what exactly it means to be a coach. And then once those roles are clear, everybody in the system needs to know what they are. And lastly, there needs to be an execution mindset, which is, it sounds kind of dark now that I look at it, but the idea is that we're focused on making things happen. We don't just talk. We have plans with deadlines, and we make sure that we don't try to take on too much. Better to err on the side of having a small number of goals and actually accomplish them than have a whole lot of goals that don't get done. Sometimes you have to say, this is our top priority, and all the other things will be addressed. But that's kind of the way the thing works. Now, there's a question that came up here at the end, and I'll just try to address it now. And the question is, what if your school's culture is resistant to change? That's not a question I can answer in 1 minute, but I'll try my best. And I would say that you tackle the culture in lots of different ways, but probably the most powerful way is to have some success with a small number of people. And if you think about a school, there are probably 1 or 2 people who are respected by the rest of the school. And if I was a coach or a principal, I would consider going to the person that others consider the informal leader in the school and saying to those people, would you try out this process? I also believe when you're up against a culture that's in your way, having one-to-one conversations frequently is a really important part of the coaching process. I have a website, instructionalcoaching.com, and there's a section on research, and there's an article you can download that describes how to have those one-to-one conversations as a start. That's just 2 quick things, starting with the people who are stars and who are informal leaders, and having one-to-one conversations. And I would say tackling something like better conversations where people really start to think deeply about how they communicate would be another possibility. That's a very quick answer to a really good question. So it's sort of the end of my time, and I've gone through the 7 things, so I think I'll turn it back to Jason. But those of you who stuck with me for the 45 minutes, I'm grateful for you listening to me as I power through all this stuff. So Jason, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you very much, Jim. On behalf of everyone who's attended, thanks again, and we really appreciate you taking the time on a Sunday afternoon to join us here Australia time. So thanks again. To everyone who attended, we hope you enjoyed the session. We've had some great feedback, a reaffirming, informative, thought-provoking, and practical session. Thanks to Janine, and thanks to Shane for his question as well earlier about the school culture. So up on your screen at the moment, you can see that Jim is joining us in June of this year, visiting Melbourne, Brisbane, Darwin, and Perth. If you'd like any more information about those events, please don't hesitate to get in contact with Bishri Bashir. His email address is there on that closing slide. Or visit our website at corwinaustralia.com.au/events. And we hope to see you there at those events and have a good chat with Jim in person. So once again, Jim, thank you very, very much. We look forward to having you on our shores, and thanks again for this morning.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
Cheers. Speak soon.